Dominica's foreign minister prepares to reply to the OAS after it demanded electoral reforms ahead of December's elections. Mobilizations against Bolivia's de facto government continue after a day of repression. And the South African Airways strike comes to an end with an agreement between workers and the company. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. Dominica's Foreign Minister Francine Barron is expected to deliver a strong message to the OAS on the heels of the OAS's chief's interference in the Caribbean islands' electoral process. In the next half hour, Barron will address a special meeting of the organization's Permanent Council in Washington. She is expected to respond to recent statements made by the OAS chief supporting the demands of Dominica's opposition for electoral reform ahead of the general elections on December 6th. All this comes in the wake of opposition-led protests on the Caribbean island on Monday night, which saw demonstrators clashing with police. Historically, Dominica has taken a hard line against intervention in the affairs of OAS member states, especially vulnerable ones. Back in June of 2017, at an OAS General Assembly in Mexico, Dominica's foreign minister called into question the OAS's integrity, saying the organization's actions must be based on respect for the sovereignty of member states at all times. Back then, Barron was alluding to a very public row between Venezuela and the OAS. In January of 2019, Dominica went on to vote against an OAS resolution, thereby recognizing Nicolás Maduro's second term as Venezuelan president.
4 member states of this organization.
And we'll be taking you live to that session at the OAS as soon as it begins in about half an hour from now. Let's move on to Bolivia, where protesters are continuing to mobilize against the authority of the de facto government installed in the country following the right-wing coup that deposed President Evo Morales. Demonstrators are blocking roads in the region of Cochabamba with 72 such blockades across the country. Citizens are rejecting the current administration led by the Bolivian religious far right and the repression of protesters that has seen the military and police kill at least 34 people with impunity granted by the state. In pursuit of international recognition, the de facto government hosted a formal meeting of diplomatic staff at Bolivia's Quemado Palace. Senator Janine Áñez addressed the attendees, insisting that there was no coup in Bolivia. She also attacked President Evo Morales, accusing him of orchestrating the massive protests against the current administration that took power almost 2 weeks ago.
Relaciones exteriores.
A cinema student at the Higher University of San Andres was detained in La Paz yesterday for saying that the Bolivian media aren't doing their work. Alexandro Fernández Mancilla had documented the mobilization condemning the massacre in Sencata earlier this week. His lawyer says that no charges have been brought against him yet. On Thursday, the Bolivian police fired tear gas at coffin bearers in La Paz. Our correspondent, Freddy Morales, was there and has the story.
They came from El Alto to La Paz, carrying some of their dead, the victims of a police and military operation to retake the Sencata fuel distribution depot. They asked the soldiers for permission to pass, and it was granted. But the police were waiting just behind and attacked at point-blank range. The attack came out of the blue. Nobody thought a funeral procession would be repressed. For a moment, the coffins lay abandoned. Then the relatives returned, while the police ordered them to leave. They gathered their dead again and fled through clouds of tear gas.
They have no pity, no mercy. Mothers, grandmothers, children are fainting there. That's the dictatorship we have now.
This is a dictatorship, and we are the people. They mutinied because they were paid, and we cannot pay them.
Several people fainted from the gas. This young woman had to be taken away by ambulance. She was with the coffin of her murdered brother.
They're killing people. We don't want to die anymore.
How can they do this to us? They are going to kill more people. How can that be? Are we dogs to be killed like that?
For goodness sake, stop killing us and our brothers. They won't let us pass. At least, respect the coffins and the death. We are peaceful. We are just accompanying our death.
The police repression cleared the main avenue of La Paz, but a few blocks away it continued, and they arrested people, mainly young protesters, even as Telesur was reporting live. Here they're asking for international help to defend human rights.
The Human Rights Committee is asking for a commission of national and international observers and human rights organizations to be set up, because we already know of 34 people killed, more than 1,000 wounded, and a similar number arrested.
A report by the Ombudsman's Office for La Paz has confirmed that many of those arrested have been submitted to torture.
Our correspondent in La Paz, Alejandro Kirk, has the latest details on the events in Bolivia.
What happened yesterday was grotesque. We've seen the extraordinary images recorded by our colleagues like Freddy Morales here, who were present when the events took place. It's grotesque because the military couldn't even let a funeral parade pass through, something so obvious. There was no violence. It only sought to demonstrate the pain and protest. Then suddenly, the police launched tear gas against the people. It's horrifying. We have to remember as well that when they killed 9 people in Cochabamba, the de facto president, Jenny Nanez, tweeted to indicate her tremendous pain for the loss of human life. And she's done exactly the same. So here, we're seeing a parallel double discourse. While speaking about the need for elections and a transitory government, which will only be in place for 3 months and won't change anything, we're also seeing the coup try and consolidate. For example, today, the prosecutor's office is acting against President Evo Morales regarding a strange video shared by the Interior Minister, with President Morales supposedly speaking to a narco-trafficker. But you don't see anything, you just hear voices. And with that, the prosecutor's office is saying that it's necessary to open a case for sedition. It's also allowing the de facto foreign minister to make a formal complaint against Mexico, where Evo Morales has been granted asylum for political persecution.
We thank Alejandro Kirk for that report. Colombia's defense minister says 3 protesters were killed in Thursday's general strike and 122 were injured. The stoppage affected almost every region of the country and was the biggest mobilization Colombia has seen for many years. Millions of workers, students, and campesinos took part with peaceful demonstrations by tens of thousands in Bogotá, Medellín, and Cali, but many of the protests ended with police repression. The strike was called against the killings of social movement leaders, as well as the neoliberal education, pension, and labor policies of President Iván Duque. Our correspondent in Bogotá, Hernan Tovar, can bring us up to speed on the events.
It was an event of almost historic proportions. Environmentalists, unions and students protested against the government's policies of war and its lack of dialogue with the people. They protested against fracking and the transnational companies that are involved in this. They demanded more resources for education. There were alleged police infiltrators in the protests in Bogotá, trying to create chaos and violence among the protesters. In other cities around the country, a curfew was called due to the escalating violence, particularly in Cali. Police violence and repression prevailed throughout the night, and there are several reports of people being attacked after the march. At Bolivar Plaza, we could see how police forces attacked people that passed by with tear gas and stun grenades. And on our way back to the National Park, we witnessed police officers dressed as civilians, acting as if they were safeguarding the surroundings. The Education Federation leader stated that there were indeed police members trying to disrupt the peaceful demonstrations, and so they did. Human rights organizations have denounced the excessive use of force used by the police, and a photo has gone viral on social media which shows the police brutally beating a woman.
Coming up after the break, public sector workers are back on the streets in Chile to protest against the neoliberal system. Stay with us. Welcome back. Trinidad and Tobago's Attorney General has laid 2 pieces of legislation in Parliament that seek to decriminalize marijuana. They're called the Amendment to the Dangerous Drug Act and the Cannabis Control Bill. The bills seek to decriminalize possession of less than 30 grams of marijuana and to introduce the option of a fixed fine for possession of between 30 and 60 grams. If passed, the law will end the jailing of people for being in possession of small quantities of marijuana. It will also see the expunging of criminal records of people who have been convicted for possessing small quantities of marijuana.
As it relates to Prime Minister today, approved for laying tomorrow in the Parliament 2 pieces of law. One, the amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act to decriminalize the possession of marijuana and the scourge. And the second piece of law is the Cannabis Control Authority Bill.
Over 10,000 people marched in Sao Paulo, Brazil to commemorate Black Awareness Day. This holiday has celebrated Brazil's Afro-descendant population since 2003, when it was established by the government of Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
Racism dominates the day-to-day of the last country that abolished slavery in the continent. Wages between black and white people in Brazil differ by over 70%, according to official figures. In the past trimester, unemployment grew only among the black population, and in the outskirts of Sao Paulo, the richest city in the country, the life expectancy of white people is 20 years longer than that of black people.
Brazil is a racist country. According to statistics, a black person is killed here every 9 minutes. Life is not easy here.
During the celebration of Black Awareness Day, people recall the implementation of racial quotas by President Lula da Silva 15 years ago. In 2019, for the first time in history, black people are a majority in public universities.
Thanks to the racial quotas, Afro-descendants know there's a place they can occupy. But we also need to take town halls, state governments, and have larger political representation.
But far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has not only diminished the existence of racism. During his campaign, he even said that black people are not even good at procreating.
This is a fascist government. Our goal is to overthrow them. There is no dialogue with authorities. During the campaign, Bolsonaro was honest about his fascist, racist, homophobic, and misogynistic views. There is no dialogue with racists.
The day also marked the second year that Black Awareness Day was celebrated without Marielle Franco. People are still waiting to find out who ordered the murder of the councilwoman. Recent developments allege links between the Bolsonaro family and the 2 killers, who met up before the murder in a place near the current president's home.
We do not believe anything. We think that whosoever killed Marielle is up there, but we cannot make accusations without proof. I think the mastermind of the murder is someone racist, a homophobic anti-Brazilian who does not respect life.
A black person in Brazil is almost 3 times more likely to be murdered than a white person. According to protesters, an anti-crime reform package pushed by Justice Minister Sergio Moro eases the responsibility of the police in cases of murder. On top of this, Bolsonaro has pushed for the loosening of gun laws, something that can only make the statistics worse.
Uruguay goes to the polls this Sunday in a runoff vote for the presidency. On Thursday, the 2 candidates closed their campaigns. The broad front candidate, Daniel Martinez, said his rival's neoliberal policies would take Uruguay down the same route as Argentina under Mauricio Macri.
To think that shrinking the state is going to be done without a social cost for the majority is at least elusive, and they know how this ends. As in Argentina, as in Brazil, as what is happening in our wounded Latin America. Fundamentalist recipes. They forget that in nations like ours, the role of the state is to help the weakest, to provide equal opportunities and equal starting points. Those who forget condemn the nation to failure, and the people end up paying the consequences of its fundamentalist policies with hunger. It's not about distributing poverty, it's about distributing the wealth, but with justice and guarantees like the Broad Front has done. We say this very clearly to a coalition that has united to confront the Broad Front without knowing the factors that united them.
Public sector workers are back on the streets in Chile on the 35th day of protests against the neoliberal system. Tax workers and other civil servants joined human rights defenders for a demonstration in what they now call Citizen Square in front of the presidential palace. They are demanding protection for the public sector and denouncing human rights abuses, and they continue to call for a constituent assembly. Now let's get an update on the situation in Chile as protests against the government of Sebastián Piñera continue. Leonel Retamal has the latest.
Chileans continue to protest on the streets, and now it's 5 weeks since demonstrations began on October 18th. Now there are calls to fill Plaza Italia once again, now called Dignity Plaza. Public workers are still on strike, calling for better pay and joining the larger protests in the country. According to the Institute of Human Rights, the figure of injured people has increased to 2,500 people due to police repression. The number of sexual abuses cases and rapes is now 73. The most worrying number was given by the Ophthalmological Society, 283 cases of eye mutilations due to gunshots by the police. New mobilizations are scheduled for this week in Plaza Italia, called by several organizations, where they will continue to demand a constituent assembly, health and living standards.
Coming up, South African Airways reaches an agreement with striking workers, ending a week-long strike. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now to news from Africa. South African Airways has reached an agreement with striking workers, effectively ending a week-long strike that brought the airline to its knees. A statement by the workers' union said they accepted a 5.9% pay raise after grueling talks with management. They have since instructed all their members to report for duty on a Saturday morning. Workers at the embattled airline downed tools on November 15th, demanding an 8% wage increase and a halt to a retrenchment program that will result in 900 workers losing their jobs. Scores of workers in South Africa protested at the ArcelorMittal steel plant in the town of Saldanha, as the plant is set to close, leaving nearly 1,000 people unemployed. ArcelorMittal announced earlier this month that it would wind down operations at the plant north of Cape Town because it was no longer viable on the export market. According to the company's manager, the plant has incurred substantial losses in the past and the medium-term outlook remains bleak. But closing down the operation will mean extensive job losses in the town, which heavily depends on the plant. The World Health Organization has warned that insecurity is hampering the fight against the Ebola epidemic on the Democratic Republic of Congo. WHO Director of Emergencies Michael Ryan told journalists on Friday that fighting between government forces and rebel groups in and around the Ebola epicenters in the east of the country has made it difficult for health workers to access certain areas where their services are needed. More than 2,000 people have lost their lives since the disease broke out in September of last year.
So from our perspective in WHO, we just want to express how alarmed we are that the lack of access and the lack of security is now preventing us ending this outbreak with our partners. Some quick numbers in terms of the specific. We believe we have the resources on the ground from a public health operations point of view to end the Ebola outbreak. The difficulty we collectively face at the moment is just when we need that unlimited and unfettered access to communities. We've lost that access in key areas, and this is a very dangerous and alarming development in this response. We've seen
Mauritius Prime Minister Pravind Jugnauth has declared Britain an illegal colonial occupier after it failed to adhere to a United Nations deadline to vacate the Chagos Islands. Under international law, they are part of Mauritius's territory. A UN resolution adopted in May demanded the UK end its occupation of the islands located nearly 10,000 kilometers away from mainland Britain. The UK has leased the largest of the islands to the US military and claims it cannot vacate the islands for security reasons. More than 200,000 people on Papua New Guinea's Bougainville Island are voting in a referendum that could lead to an independent nation. The referendum is part of a 2001 peace deal. That agreement ended a civil war between pro-independence fighters and the Papua New Guinean security forces, who were supported by foreign mercenaries paid by multinational mining corporations. A majority of the voters are expected to vote in favor of independence due to what they say is widespread racial discrimination and economic marginalization.
This is an important referendum. It is the people's right, and they vote how they see things. It's part of the peace process and part of Bougainville's culture.
On to Europe now. Dozens of workers who were laid off by the household appliances manufacturer Whirlpool in the French city of Amiens have protested against President Emmanuel Macron's visit to the town. The workers accused Macron of betraying them by failing to stop the redundancies at Whirlpool, as he had promised during his 2017 presidential campaign. More than 200 people lost their jobs when Whirlpool sold the plant to an investor who, after 1 year, declared bankruptcy and disappeared. That was despite receiving millions of euros from taxpayers in the form of state aid.
Today what I'm asking Macron is to resign. He's worthless. That's all. When he says that he is from Amiens, suddenly he is from Amiens. I'm too. He is too. We agree. There is nothing exceptional about it. It is provocation he comes to clear the ground, as he was able to do during the 2 rounds of the 2017 presidential election. Obviously, as he was able to do in relation to his promise in October 2017. It's crap. He pissed us off.
And when in China, the city of Zhuhai in the southern province of Guangdong is hosting the 6th edition of the China International Circus Festival, an event where companies from around the world present a wide variety of shows celebrating the diversity of the art.
More than 200 artists from 22 countries have gathered in the southern city of Zhuhai to participate in the 6th edition of the International Festival of Chinese Circus.
This festival is very important. I work in the circus industry, and it serves to promote Chinese companies, to share and compete with foreign figures. The audience also seems very happy, with a lot of ovations that move me.
The event will run until November 23, and a total of 24 circus companies are set to present performances, including extreme sports, aerial acrobatics, clowns, magic shows, and dance.
I am from the province of Guizhou. I hear about this festival. I wanted to bring my children to see the show so they can see Chinese artists, but also artists from other countries.
Latin America is represented by artists from Argentina and Colombia, who share their talent with representatives from China, Russia, the United States, France, Japan, Germany, among others.
I am a circus artist from Uha province in central China, and very soon we organize an international circus festival ourselves. I came to learn from this experience. It is also a great opportunity for the audience to see so many artists from different nations.
The International Chinese Circus Festival was held for the first time in 2013. It aims to promote the development of circus as an art form and of cultural exchange among people.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesforenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.